Did you see that?
I did. Yeah, no fade out.
No fade out. I mean, I do have it. I don't know what happened to it. So I got to like replace the video. So before we went live, right? I was in there trying to put Salem Witch Board Museum up there. And so it wasn't letting me type in the banners where you put it up. I don't know if you're familiar with StreamYard at all.
No, not at all.
So it allows me to type. So I was like, okay, something must be wrong there. So then I was going to type it in the comments. And I can't type in the comments either. I hope everybody can. Hello, Kyle. Hey.
Hey.
Hi, Amber. So I hope everybody can hear and see it because like I can't, it's not allowing me to type in the comments either. So I'll try mid-show. I was trying to put a banner up for John for the Salem Witch Board Museum that he owns and runs. I've never been to Salem, so that's it's on my bucket list to make it to Salem. I just want to check it out. It sounds like my kind of place. So I'm sure having a shop in Salem is awesome.
It's Salem. I mean, Salem's a really awesome city to begin with.
Yeah.
Forget the fact that we're in Massachusetts, which, obviously a very liberal state, but Salem is like almost a little bubble inside of that state, and really diverse, really wonderful people, small mom and pop shops. And, besides the history of not only a New England town on the water, you got great architecture, and it's a really amazing place in general. But to put, some of the shops that have made Salem their home, it's really like unlike any other place you'd find.
Yeah. I mean, everybody I know that visits there, they love it, and so it definitely is on my bucket list. I don't know why I haven't been there yet. I mean, it's like, I don't know. I need to make it there. So enough about all that with me. Yes, I am going to come visit you, Sherry. I have to come visit you. So we have Sherry watching. Thanks, Cher. We have a Jing from Indonesia, John.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Checking in, a Jing. Thank you so much. So really quick, I want to let everybody know, unfortunately, Bob was unable to make it tonight. We found out last minute. So I apologize for not giving anybody a heads up, but John is still here, which I was excited to have both of them come on. This is a big show for me because I talk about it a lot. So I'm glad that at least you came on too. So let's get started. I want to know, where you got started in all this stuff. How you and Bob hooked up and all just all about the museum. I want to know everything you're willing to share, John.
Absolutely. No, let me give you a little background. So the way I became interested in Ouija boards was I actually inherited my grandmother's board. My grandmother had used the board alone, and she was very fast. She would fly on the thing, yell out letters and numbers quicker than anyone could write them down. And so I inherited her board in the late 90s. I went online to learn more about it. And at that time, there weren't a lot of websites around. But I found one called Museum of Talking Boards, and he had a gallery of boards. And that really inspired me to want to try to collect these boards. So I became a very obsessed collector for a long time, about 6 years before I finally met Murch and Calvin and Rick and some of these people that eventually we formed the group, the Talking Board Historical Society. So I'm part of a registered nonprofit, and we research, preserve, celebrate the history of these boards. And through our research, we've uncovered stories from a woman named Helen Peters, who is responsible for naming the Ouija board, proving it works at the patent office. So we've put a headstone in for her when we found out she was buried in an unmarked grave. We also have done that for her brother-in-law, who patented the board, Elijah Bond.
No, it's so amazing. That's
Yeah.
so cool.
So a lot of different projects like that. And then roughly 3.5 years ago, I opened the Salem Witch Board Museum. That's really the world's only Ouija board museum. Murch, when he lived here in Massachusetts, him and I, it was a dream of ours to kind of open a museum together. And unfortunately, he moved out to Denver. But he is really a main part of the museum. Not only just the stories I tell, the history is from his research, but just the everything that I do in the museum is really keeping him in mind, and he curates quite a few things there as well. And through that, about a year ago, I went to Sage Paracon in the UK to lecture about the board. And when I came back
That's
from
awesome.
that, yeah, it was a really awesome time and very fortunate to have that opportunity. When I came back from there, I left my job of 22 years. And so I only do talk about Ouija boards now. That's it. I'm at the museum full time. Over the last 35 years, I've been a musician as well. So I've toured a good part of the world, played on a lot of records and whatnot. That was always kind of the passion I thought I had in life, was to do something with music. And it's kind of funny that, inheriting my grandmother's board has really sent me down a rabbit hole in a totally different direction I would not have imagined.
Can't you just say you're very passionate?
I am absolutely very passionate.
Right. Because I don't think, obsession is, because people would say that I'm a very, very passionate person. So when I love something, I love it hard.
Mm-hmm.
Love it hard. And everybody that knows me or has come in contact with me knows that I love that thing. You know what I mean? So,
Absolutely.
I don't like when people say hobby. I don't like when people, you know what I mean? I think
Sure.
it's more a passion. You have a passion for this. And I think it's amazing what you and Bob do. I mean, and that's how I knew Bob. I met Bob really long time ago at Phenomenology in Gettysburg. And prior to seeing Bob's lecture on the Ouija board, I was that typical person that thought that it brought in demons. It brought in bad stuff. So I was afraid to have it. And my mother was the one that actually taught me that part, because I came home one day with a Ouija board. She goes, "Oh, what are you doing with that thing?" And I was like, "What?" She goes, "You're not bringing that in my house." I said, "Why?" She goes, "Them things are bad juju. No, 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 no." And she started telling me some stories that happened to her and her friends when they were like, and of course, this is like in the early 70s. So, that's
Sure.
when it was becoming this bad thing, right?
Yep, absolutely.
So they played with Ouija boards and they were bad, And so I always had this perception of that. And then I see Bob's lecture at Phenomenology, and in 1 hour changed my mind.
Yeah.
And that's not easy to do with me.
Sure.
So I had a lot of respect for him in that part. So then I started following him. So I have followed him. I had Brandon Hodge on,
Nice.
a couple months ago. So I'm very happy to have you on. This is
awesome.
another part of it. So, all right. So I don't know where I was going with that. So you also collect Ouija boards?
Oh, absolutely. That's a big part of this. One of the things that I collect. I've collected many things over the years, starting as a little kid. In the house right now, Kentucky Fried Chicken rules a whole room in our house, life-size Colonel, menus from all over the world.
Really?
Real, authentic, photographs of him taken directly from the photographer that took them, to I don't even know, original, fixtures from the restaurants in the 50s and whatnot. Also Halloween is another couple rooms in the house where it's not only monster toys, blow molds, vintage Halloween stuff from the 40s up to like the 70s.
So this is the museum?
No, it's at the house. These are some of the other things that I collect.
Well, you know that if I come there, I'm gonna have to see your
Oh,
house?
you'll definitely wanna come to the house, absolutely, you're
For
invited, and,
sure.
you'll be pretty amazed. It's a
It
space that
sounds so fun.
it's curated pretty well, and, we actually rent it out on, for movie sets and, video shoots and photo shoots and whatnot, yeah. So
Wow.
that's just, collecting a lot of things, Ouija boards, after my grandmother passed away, and, you know, I grabbed everything that I could, but I'd say probably 10 years into collecting before it just really became an obsession. It's something that I just can't stop. I search hours every day, and I'm very obsessed to
So
find this.
when you're searching, like, what are you searching? Like, what are you looking for? Just anything?
Anything I don't have.
That's awesome.
Anything I
So do you and Murch go back, like, does it, because he collects too,
Oh, yeah.
So are you guys like hiding your searches from each other? Because you
No, actually, quite the opposite. I think if you meet people that collect other items, and that could be, baseball cards, records, things like that. I think in general, people tend to kind of get the item and hide it from the other person, and kind of nervous to let people know what they have in their collection. But really, what Merch has kind of helped do is to kind of curate this community of people where we try to help each other as much as possible. And so it's a pretty unique situation because Merch has been doing this a very long time, and if there's something that he has been after for a long time and I find it, I'm happy to see him get it. And
yeah,
he's quite helpful with me and a lot of other collectors to get items that we don't have. And of
that's
course,
awesome.
you'll come down to the point where two people want something no matter what, and it might. But in general, a core group of us really try not to bid the other person up if it's an auction, to spend the other person's money, because you're only kind of hurting a friend. And so, I think Merch and I especially, we value our friendships with the people over the items. So we tend to step back if it's something that's going to maybe cause any problems or whatever. But it's a pretty unique situation. But Merch has helped me get so many amazing items, and I try to really repay that back to him, and help him when I can.
That's awesome. That's really, really awesome. Shout out to my bestie April. Love you, babe. Um, so all right. So now, do you have some items in the museum that Bob's collected? Like, you know what I mean? Like, do you kind of house some of that stuff as well for him?
Absolutely. I mean, Murch is really the main researcher for the history, and through that, he's been able to get some really amazing items that no other museum is possible to get. I mean, we have Helen Peters' christening dress, which is she's the woman who named the board and proved it worth the patent
Oh
office.
my gosh.
That's from 1851. We have the pocket watch that William Fold was wearing. He made the Ouija board for 70 years. He used the board, told him to build a second factory. He built the factory, fell from the factory roof, died from his injuries, and we have the pocket watch he was wearing when he died. So those kind of things are not just the boards or the planchettes. We get a lot of personal items that belong to the people that are really responsible for manufacturing the board, and those are Merch has built friendships with the families to those manufacturers, and they've been extremely generous. And so really anything in Merch's collection, he's been extremely generous to lend to the museum whatever I really want to put in. And so it's pretty amazing because it's just something you won't see anywhere else. No matter, anyone else
Oh,
could probably put together an exhibit of Ouija boards and throw a bunch up. But to really, get the history and the history behind the items, which to me is a lot more interesting of a story
oh,
on
I
it.
love it. I love it. I love the history of it.
Absolutely.
Like even when I had Brandon on, he was talking about the planchette and everything like that. Like
Mhm.
you never realize that those were two separate entities at one point.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like I
Yep.
never knew that. So we're like I just learning about all this is just, and the history is just amazing to me. I also want to know now, do you believe that people can use the boards for divination and ways to communicate? Do you believe that you have a lot? It sounds like you have a lot of historical stuff in your possession, along with the Ouija board, and the stigma behind that
Mhm.
kind of feeds in. Do you think that these items can? I'm not going to say I don't believe that objects can be possessed, but what I want to say is, do you think these things can um, hold energies or communicate with the other side, if you will?
I believe they work. I mean, my grandmother, when she used it, like I said, she was very fast on it. I believe they work. I believe they work differently for everybody, and beliefs and superstitions or rules that you might have are going to make it work differently than me if I have different views of it. Neither person is wrong. It just works differently for everybody. But I believe they work. I believe they work on your intent. And if your intent is positive and you want to maybe connect to your deceased loved one, that is probably going to be a different experience than if your intent is to kind of maybe not take it so seriously and maybe as like a dare or a dare game or something like that. I think you'll probably have a negative experience with it. So really it's based on you. I love all that history of the board. I love that these were really created and came about to help a lot of people at their worst time in their lives. But I really do love that fact that people do not use them that way, and that there are bad stories because of that. And I'm a fan of all of it. So you ask anyone their Ouija board story, don't ask them, don't judge it based on whether you believe these things can really happen. Base it on whether or not they seem pretty matter of fact to tell you what happened. And so that's really what I love about it.
So is this right? Salem Witch Board Museum.com?
It is, yes.
It started working, so I figured I'd throw it up there. I put it in the comments too as well, so people can check it out.
Nice. Thank you.
So this conversation is for sure going to make me book a trip to Salem in 2024.
Hey, good.
Just so you know. I really need to. So have you ever had any experiences with anything, maybe you weren't, and then you acquired a certain item that maybe you noticed things were happening, or have you had any experiences with anything that you own or have come in contact with?
No, I mean, in the museum specifically, there are some boards that have been donated, and they were donated because the previous owners had bad experiences with them, and nothing has happened for me. I don't. Unfortunately, the board doesn't work the same way it did, like for my grandmother, and so I don't have much good. I don't have much experience using it, and nothing has really happened for me. Now, I've seen it happen to other people. I mean, I've seen people come to the museum, get drawn directly to pieces that were, donated, and they'll ask specifically, I feel something with them. People that photograph some of these items who, with film, when they come back and get it developed, the picture looks like someone's shaking it. I've seen people's reaction to come in and get to a certain area and, feel pressure on their chest and have to walk out, get emotional, almost pass out. So I've witnessed those things. But for me personally, the only thing I've ever felt anywhere is when I've been to Gettysburg as well. And that is the only place I've been to. A lot of, paranormal locations, investigations. And I don't know how to describe it other than Gettysburg. I just really felt some sort of heaviness or just something in the air, a difference that I hadn't noticed before.
Gettysburg is the most amazing place.
It really is.
In the universe. Like I have the coordinates tattooed.
Oh, no way.
So when I say that I'm passionate, like,
Yeah.
so most people probably say I'm obsessed with Gettysburg, but I'm like, no, I'm passionate. I just want to live there.
Yes.
And when I die, I want to haunt there. Like I want to live there. My
I
whole
love
life.
that.
So yes, I am obsessed with Gettysburg. I have a obsession. Yep. The mayor, they all call me the mayor of Gettysburg. Yep, for sure. Yeah, they're probably like, oh my God, he said the magic word. No. We're not going to talk about the Witchboard. We're going to talk about Gettysburg, but we're not. We're not. So that's interesting. So all right. And here's the other thing you said too. You said the board that you got from your grandmother doesn't work as well. Do you think because that was her board that it worked better for her in a way?
I think it, like I said, you influence the board quite a bit, whether you know it or not. A superstition like you shouldn't use it alone. I would suggest to people, if you believe you shouldn't use it alone, then don't. You want to have the best experience possible. Not everybody believes that. And in history, during a war, it might be common for a woman to have used them alone. But, if you believe you shouldn't, and then you do try to use it alone, I'll almost guarantee you that the experience you have is influenced. You believe you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. And so I am so nervous about that board not working for me that I will influence it into not working for me. And that's the best way I can explain it is being a musician for as long as I've been. The common, you know, the common phrase, the common thing I always say is, if Jimi Hendrix was my father, I wouldn't want to play guitar. I'm not going to be as good on guitar. And that's really how I feel about the Ouija board. I just don't, it's not going to work as well for me as it did for her.
That's exactly what I thought you were going to say. Like, not, I mean, that's what I was kind of saying. Like, I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. Like, I feel like, I think now I'm just a paranormal investigator. You know what I'm
Mhm.
saying? Like, I'm not a psychic medium, like my bestie April here. She can walk you through a place and she loves you, by the way. So that's a good
Oh, thank you.
um, but like, I just investigate. I can hear things sometimes, that get caught on record, but you know, but there's people that have like they do tarot or they do do card readings, right? And they always, have their deck, like nobody else can use it and stuff like that. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like it has their, if you will, energy on it.
Sure.
However you say. So that's why I was saying like maybe the board acts the same for people. You know what I mean? As far as
I mean, I believe the boards would work the same for everybody, but I've met plenty of people who have come in and told me that if they made their own board, they put their energy into it, it would work better than a store-bought board. And so I would say if you believe that, then it probably would work better for you, um, those kind of things. So, and even, the other example I give all the time is, uh, Ouija being a brand name, you'll see a lot of boards that kind of steal that name and they put it on their board. And they're really just cash grabs or other manufacturers that look to cash in the popularity. But I've met people who told me that the fakes don't work the same. And I'm always like, well, again, I believe they all work the same.
wait a second.
Go ahead.
There's even drama in the Ouija board world?
Well, with
With
manufacturers,
fakes?
of course, yeah,
With
there's
fakes?
hundreds of lawsuits about it. Yeah. Yeah. So
It's
a couple
everywhere.
a couple things happen in the history. I mean, the first thing is the patent that they get in 1890. When they patent the Ouija board, Ouija becomes that first mass-produced board. And the patent gave them 16 years before anyone else could make another talking board. So any of the ones you see from like 1892, like a Volo board or something, they're not only instructed, get a cease and desist, they can't produce it, they get ordered to destroy their inventory. So that kind of stuff is happening as
What?
well as later on, after 1907, where Ouija is, can now have competitors. People take the name, and sometimes they misspell it on purpose. WHEEGEE, WEJA, things like that. But really, it's other manufacturers kind of cashing in, taking the name, and putting it on their board. And so, William Fold, who's manufacturing in the 1920s, he has dozens of lawsuits at any given time combating these people stealing the names. They're usually cashing in during a time of war when it's very popular. And so, yeah, there's a lot of drama and a lot of court cases when it comes to Ouija.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's crazy. No, I've never heard of any of the knockoffs that you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes they're counterfeited pretty well. Where if you were to look at the original 1919 Ouija board, I'd show you another one, and at first glance you might be like, I don't see a difference. But as you look closer, you see some of the logos are slightly different. They don't say trademarked or registered. Little things like that. Other times they're obviously fake because they're spelling it differently, putting it on paper as opposed to wood or masonite or something like that. So they have different materials, but yeah, and a lot of lawsuits.
Wow, that's crazy. So, what's the oldest board you have?
The oldest one is 1890, and
Oh,
really anything older than that board would be homemade. So 1850 to 1890, roughly, these boards are all homemade. 1890, it really becomes the first mass manufactured board, and Charles Kennard is the person at the time down in Baltimore. He called it a witch board. So the oldest one I have, doesn't say Ouija on it. It doesn't have any logo on it. It actually says good night as opposed to goodbye. It has a kind of a different placement of the half moon on the right corner. And so, but that board is what became the Ouija when they named it a few months later.
so where's this Ouija? how's that come in? Because I've always heard it pronounced Ouija, right? And it wasn't until Bob's lecture I heard him say Ouija.
Yeah,
So that's what I've always called it then. After that, I was like, okay, this guy knows what the heck he's talking about, so I'm gonna go with that.
The brand itself, the brand is Ouija, and they'll put that, pronounced so it spells Ouija. But, when you ask someone if they use the board, you would ask them if they Ouija. So Ouija becomes the verb, Ouija is the
Okay.
noun. Yeah.
Gotcha.
I think there's even an ad that William Fold with Ouija had put out that you say Ouija, we say Ouija, both spell fun.
That's awesome. So now, do you use the boards?
I don't. Like I said, with my grandmother, it worked very well for her, and it hasn't worked the same for me.
You've tried.
I've tried, yes, absolutely. And I've been to paranormal, when we're at Sage, Karen and I were on the board a little bit as well. But it just, if it works even in the slightest bit, it's not nearly that same speed that my grandmother had flying on that thing,
Yeah. That's crazy. Like you want to obviously have an experience with
Of course, yeah.
and it's not happening.
Well, I'm not forcing it though either,
Right. No, I get it.
I don't try every day and hope. I actually would prefer not to try because like I said, I'm so afraid of influencing it into not working. I know someday it'll work for me. And really when I've done that event with Karen at Sage, she has such a great connection to the board that I think, if I was to do it with her, it probably would work for me.
Yeah.
I feel pretty confident just seeing what she's done for other people who were either nervous or it wasn't working very well. And she just put her hand on the planchette and it took off, So she's somebody that I really admire because of her, she's used it for so long and never had a bad experience with it, gets very positive, inspirational messages from it.
See,
and
that's awesome.
Yeah, so she's someone that I really, push people towards whenever they want to try to use the board to watch her YouTube channel.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And what was her name? Karen
Dahlman, and she's Dahlman, Karen, and she's actually a director on the Talking Board Historical Society with Murch and myself.
That's awesome. Raquel, beautiful Raquel, has a question. How collectible are the old Swami Ouija boards? Acquired one from a thrift shop.
That was the very first, besides my grandmother's board, that was the first board I collected. And there's quite a few variations. I think I have about 10 or so. One of them is the address at the bottom is 666 Lakeshore Drive, Chicago.
Really?
So it's changed a few times. But and then one of them is the Swami Mystery Board, and one is the Swami Ouija Board. If it says Ouija on there, I'd say it's a little more rare because more than likely they got in trouble for kind of stealing that name, and so they would switch it to Mystery. But it's a rare. I mean, I would, if I had it at the museum for sale, it would probably be about $125. So it's rare. I mean, it's 1940s board, made World War II, and yeah, pretty awesome board.
That sounds awesome. So, all right. So I might have, I want to go back to really quick. Well, hold on a second. So you've been around when Karen's used this stuff, right? And if she's like, you did say you witnessed people having experiences?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Now do you believe this is going to sound like you're like, I know you're not saying anything bad about anybody if you're whatever you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but do you believe that what they are experiencing because of the board?
I do. I believe they're having an experience because they're using the board. Whether or not you want to say it's that they're speaking to a ghost or a spirit, or whether they're tapping into their subconscious, either way, I believe that board is working for them. Maybe it's working in combination. I can't say, but I think a lot of people, Murch always says it best, and I kind of steal this from him, is that, these boards are really they come about to help people at the worst times of their lives, grieving. And so people tend to get caught up on where the message comes from as opposed to the message itself. And ultimately, if the message is helping you in any way, I really don't think it's as important as to where it comes from.
Right. So, when I was younger, before my mom, tainted me with this awful, perception of
Mhm.
of the Ouija board, um, I was I attempted to use it one time, and I remember I would not even barely touch this thing, you know, and I remember asking a question, or we asked the question, like who's here with us or something, and in my head I kept saying William, 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 like because I wanted, like, that's my grandfather, right? So, and it spelled out Will. So I'm like, well, how did that happen? Like, is it reading my mind? So,
Yeah.
like, I'm like, did I make it happen with my mind? I don't know. I only did it once, because I brought it home and I'm freaked out, um, and that was her father. So I didn't want to go, whoa, pop up came,
Yeah.
and you know what I mean? Like, I didn't
Yeah.
want to say that to her because she probably would have freaked out even more,
Oh, sure.
So, um, I've never tried that again. Do you know what I mean? Like, I've never, like, being older and with more education in the paranormal side of things, you know what I mean? Like, I've never tried that again. But I can't explain why that happened. I don't know, because I wasn't touched. I didn't move it, and I
Yeah.
didn't say
Yeah.
it out loud. So the person I was doing it with didn't know that's what I was
Sure.
thinking, So I don't know. Like, I that was my way of testing it, I guess. But how do I know if I've never done it again? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. I,
so
I hear similar stories in the sense that, a lot of times people are using that board to kind of get confirmation there's an afterlife. And a lot of times they use it one time and then they don't want to use it again. Whether you get that confirmation, it's like it was working for you,
yeah,
maybe you want to try it.
yeah, yeah. I think what threw me off was that that's what I was thinking.
Sure.
So I was like, "Wait a minute, how is this happening? Why is it?"
Yeah.
So I was unsure about it, obviously, but curious enough to want to bring it home,
Of course. Yeah.
and still try to use it, but I never did because my mom.
Yeah.
Um, so, uh, so when people come to the museum, um, so say I come there, I purchase a ticket, and I come there. What am I going to go through? Just like the history, and
Well,
you started to tell me a little bit about what you
yeah,
had there.
there's two things. I mean, so it's in the back of another store. So you walk into this store called Remember Salem, and you walk through the store. You get to the cashier at the back, and you pay the admission to go into the back room. And so back there is the museum, and I'm the only employee, and I work as much as I possibly can. If I'm not there, then it's a self-guided tour where you go through and learn the history. You find out about some of the items, some of the stories behind the item itself. And there's, like I said, there's some donated boards. You can read those stories. If I am there, which I am there quite a bit, then it's a lot different of an interaction, because not only am I going over the history with you, I'm really there answering any question you might have.
Mhm.
And, some people are drawn to different items. I could have Helen's christening dress and they think that's cool, 1851, but I'm going to tell you how we got that. And that is a pretty crazy story of people hoarding things that they didn't even know they were people they were related to, So
So
sometimes
cool.
the stories behind the items are what I find very interesting. And so it changes, per person coming in, what they really want to know about. And if they're not really sure, then I'm there to kind of help give them some guidance and start telling them things that I think are pretty interesting things about the board. And then it goes from there. And then sometimes people come in just to tell me their Ouija story. They tell me stories that people didn't believe them, people laughed at them, they want validation. And so, the Ouija history is so rich, it's so varied that, we could spend a half hour just talking about music in the Ouija board, let
Mhm.
alone movies or literature, or just the history behind the people behind it, the popularity of World War II, like murders, suicide, all these different, things to it. So when I'm there, you really can get the full history. If you have questions or you seem interested, we could go for more than an hour talking about the Ouija board.
That's awesome. That's so awesome.
It's a
Now,
pretty unique place. It's
yeah.
not. I've been to a lot. I love traveling, and I love to go to the quirky little small museums. Those are the ones that you
The
never know
coolest.
when you don't know when they're going to close, and so you want
Yeah.
to support them, and especially something niche like the Ouija board, And so, of all the museums I've ever been to, the ones that I've had the best experiences at were the ones that I met the owner or the curator or the people that could tell me different stories than what I could just read on the plaque.
Right.
And so I try to offer that up. I think I'm one of the few museums that really you get anything you want from it. In as long stay as long as you want. There's really no time limit. It's if you're interested and you have questions, then we're going to talk for a while. And it's a pretty intimate thing where you don't feel rushed out. You don't feel you're taking it like Salem. I love Salem, but there are definitely attractions there where they're meant to take your money and get you out quick, and that's not the museum I run.
That's awesome. No, that's awesome. Do you know of anybody else that has a witch board museum? Now you call it a witch board. Is there a reason? Like
I
I
call
know that I mean there's that we call it talking boards, witch boards, Ouija. I mean, is it all the same or are there any variations to them?
No, I mean, so Witchboard, Talking Board, Spirit Board, those are all the kind of the generic names for them, and Ouija being that the brand everyone knows.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But I became the Witchboard Museum because before Ouija existed, they were calling the board that they were producing a witchboard. So that's number one. Number two, 1886, Grover Cleveland, who became the only president to be married in the White House, he was gifted a witchboard by a local Massachusetts company who had made talking boards. And so then I'm in Salem, so everything, of course, is witch in Salem.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge fan of the Witchboard movies. So those are the main reasons why I really chose it. I probably could have gone with the Ouija Museum, but I would have to get permission from Hasbro to do that, and I didn't feel like going down that path.
Is that like would that be a difficult thing?
Well, I suspect it would be. It was enough that I'm like, I don't need to call it a Ouija museum. It's the Witchboard Museum.
Gotcha.
Um, because Hasbro, sometimes they're great and easy to work with, and other times they're not. And so I just I needed to open by a certain date, and I was like, that's not going to hold me up, you know.
Well,
Uh,
I think the naming of it is awesome. I like that,
yeah,
and I was just curious because you do hear it called different things. You know what I mean?
sure.
So I just didn't know. Me not being educated in the Ouija board, the Ouija. I That's why I was just asking because I do hear it called different things. Um, what was I going to ask you though?
Well, you'd asked
So,
if there's other museums, and
oh yeah. I was going to say, do you know of any?
I know of other museums that have a Ouija board or two on display, and I know of museums that have more than that on display. But there are none that really are the history of these boards. They're exhibits, but I would say I'm the only museum out there.
That's awesome. What is the oldest Ouija board that you know of?
I believe 1886 is the oldest one that we can prove. It's a homemade board. It has the alphabet around the perimeter of the board, so the planchette kind of would sit in the middle and never fall off of it. And we've able to prove the date based on a family Bible or diary that came along with it that they talk about using the board in there and stuff.
Wow.
And so that's the oldest one that's in Calvin von Crush's collection. Calvin's also a director on the Talking Board Historical Society, and yeah, there's a few handful of boards that we suspect are older than that original witch board that I have, but really hard to date something that's homemade because 100 years goes by and something that's 150 years old, or what's 100 years old, what's 150 years old. Good luck telling the difference between those two pieces of wood. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for
So
sure. So when you guys are trying to figure out okay, so like say you're trying to figure this 1880, if it was 80 to 1886, um, who do you consult with to try to, I mean, who do you guys work with, like people that know about, this is gonna be a dumb question, but I don't know. So you're saying it was on wood. So would you go to somebody that's like a hit, like knows about the wood structures back then and stuff like that? Would you consult with people like that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's older boards that like so. Kennard, the first Ouija board that came out, came with these slats on the back of it, and so there's little nails in those slats. So yeah, we're gonna go talk to people that would be more knowledgeable than us on, is that the kind of nail that was used in this time? Is it the right length? Is it the right size? All those different things. So of course, yeah, we consult with quite a bit of people. We were given items directly from family members. Murch has Charles Kennard's monogrammed pillowcases in his collection. Well, even though the family gave it to him, and it's clearly that's the story, we still brought it to experts, textile experts, who could then tell us that yes, that is the material, that's the right whatever thread count
That's
or whatever.
awesome. So you don't even take family's word for it. You guys
Absolutely.
still. That's awesome.
No, I mean the funny thing is, Murch is really the guy that researches the most. He is very obsessed. That's what he loves to do. And I've been with him at the library when he's researched, and you could have a board where on the back of it, it has the street address for the company. And it says, Central Street in Baltimore. Well, that's not good enough for him. He'll go and get every street directory for 3 years, scan the street directories, just to prove that business was in fact at that address.
That's
So,
awesome.
he goes above and beyond really to make sure that he can back up anything that we discover that, is backed up with facts or proof that there's.
That's awesome.
It is. I mean, there's a lot to it,
Yeah.
but talking to other experts, is really huge. I mean, talking to local historians, talking to people, librarians in other states and towns, to working with the National Archives, the Smithsonian, the White House have helped us try to hunt down that wedding present in 1886 Grover Cleveland board. So we've used a lot of different.
They don't think you guys are crazy?
No, they do.
I mean, like, I don't think that, right? But that's like out in the corporate and historical world. You know what I mean? Like the people that are, they poo-poo the paranormal stuff. You know what I mean? Or anything there, in that genre.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised that you did get so much help. I mean, I think that's awesome.
Murch is a very personal person, as you know,
Yeah.
and when people meet such a driven person, I think a lot of times they're in for the hunt as well. They're curious. Wait a minute, what are you doing exactly? And so they want to get involved as well. And so he's met some pretty amazing people along the way who have helped him figure these things out. And it's a big deal in our world. To them, they're probably like, okay, but I think when you take someone on a journey that you're excited. Oh my, I found this out, and this is something we can prove. It's a big deal. Helen Peters is a good example of that, because she was a woman that sadly was written out of history for over 100 years. And through that research with Murch, going through these letters to the Baltimore Sun newspaper and going through census records and ancestry to a rooming house, it took 6 years to uncover the story. And so pretty amazing to now be able to retell this story of this woman who was lost to history. And so the Smithsonian Magazine actually picked up on not just the fact that a woman was responsible for naming it and proved it worth the patent office, but they picked up on the story of like, wait a minute, here's a guy who's not formally trained in research. He's just a guy that had a quest for knowledge, and how do you figure these things out, and just stumbled through the way and found a way to work around, troubleshoot these things that he just figured out as he went.
That somebody else would probably give up on, right? I mean,
100%.
You hit like these walls, and then it gets frustrating, but the fact, and that just goes to show you that truth and people that are passionate in it, you're not going to find stuff out in a week.
No.
6 years.
6 years for Helen. That headstone that everyone is a lot of people are familiar with is Helen's brother-in-law. His name was Elijah Bond, and he patented the Ouija board. And it's a headstone that looks just like a Ouija board. It's down in Baltimore, and so a lot of people might be familiar with it from the internet. And that was a 10-year search just to find out where he was buried. And the kicker is the very first place that we looked into, Greenmount Cemetery, the largest cemetery in Baltimore, and they said he wasn't buried there. So when you start going to other places, Maryland, Virginia, West Virginia, only to go back to that cemetery 10 years later and look through the cards, the index cards yourself, and see that his card was there. It was just stuck to his son's card. So 10,
Oh,
10 years of searching in other places, and he was in the very first place that we had looked.
oh,
So,
wow.
there's those kind of things as well that, a lot of this stuff is not a quick answer. And questions that Murch, threw out to other people 10, 20 years ago, we'll slowly start to get information back on some of that, like a little piece here and there, and eventually start connecting those dots and getting a better picture of what we're trying to figure out.
Gina's asking, does he pay to get access? What do you mean? Does she mean like to the sources you use to get the information or the places that you go?
Oh, the museum is an admission to go there.
Oh,
But as
to
far
rec.
as to records, no, we subscribe to quite a bit, not just the newspapers. We subscribe to a lot of different.
Yeah, you have to, right?
Absolutely, yep.
You
And
know,
like I
you
said, and like with the bond stone, putting that stone in for him, we had to go to the records room directly, and that was all those records were all handwritten prior to 1928, and so we had to flip through each one at a time physically just to find that card was stuck to the his son daughter-in-law's card.
wow,
Yeah.
that's amazing. I mean, it's like bittersweet, right? You're like, yes, we found it. Oh my God, we knew it 10 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, you're like so excited that you actually have the answer, but you're like, huh, 10 years. Like, really?
It's definitely a kicker, but I think we're more happy
You
to
looked at that person
finally
up on
know.
Facebook, like, yo, dude,
And
10 years.
you would think that things get easier as more, everything's getting digitized, but uh, in some ways it is. In a lot of ways, it's not. There's so many things that are not digitized, um, that you still have to look through microfiche, look through books, turn pages one at a time, and just hope words jump off the page at you.
Yeah. Anthony's asking, do you own a Volo talkie board? I'm originally from Chicago, so I was curious.
I do have a Volo in the museum that's on loan from Murch. That's a very rare board made by Charles Kennard, who had not only manufactured the Ouija board. He is the guy that, when he left Kennard Novelty Company, he tried to make a competing board called the Volo, and he was shut down with a cease and desist and ordered to destroy his inventory. So I believe we only know of two of those boards that still exist today. And yeah, one of them is in the museum on loan from Murch. That is definitely one of the grails that I hunt for on a very regular basis. Volo probably being named from the town just outside of Chicago. Yeah.
Now, are there private collectors of this kind of stuff that you guys contact, or is this kind of just eBay? You know what I'm saying? Like when you say you're searching for stuff, you know what I mean? And people that collect. So you're saying a lot of it comes from family. So let's just say that 1886, you said came with like a Bible, a family
Mhm.
Bible, and came with the board.
Yep.
There's a lot of people that would look at that as like, oh my God, it came with a Bible. Like it's
Well,
bad.
the family Bible,
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So now do people find you guys and say, hey, my family, I found this in the attic, can you tell me what this is? Or are you guys searching for this stuff and finding the family?
Both. Of course, people come across things all the time and they go online to learn more about it. But these non Ouija brands, like the Volo or something, if you found one, you're going to go on the internet and try to find out something about it. There's not a lot on there because it's such a rare board. And so you might just reach out to Murch, who's really the expert, the world expert when it comes to this stuff. He talks about it on his website, William Fold. So more than likely he would get reached out to. Gene at the Museum of Talking Boards. So me having a museum. So people do reach out with quite a few things, but we're actively looking for things. I've run ads for over 15 years everywhere saying I'm looking for a Volo board, and so it's possible that someone never thought of it before, but they saw that ad and was like, you know what? I think I have something named that in my closet, and
Yeah.
you don't know where this stuff is going to come from. So the more people that are looking, the better, is really ultimately the goal. But it's definitely a mix. We get people that reach out that worked at the factory, and they say, hey, they told me to throw this away, and I didn't, and I saved it, and it's Ouija related. It's one of the printing plate we have in the museum was actually thrown in the trash. It was rescued from the trash.
Who did that?
And that's an employee that worked there. So,
Oh, wow.
the family members, the christening dress came from Helen's friends. So Helen, who named the board, her and her husband died very poor. They were buried in a friend's family plot in Denver, Colorado. And so the other family, the Hewitt family, had some of their grandfather's belongings, and they had some of Helen's belongings.
Oh,
So
wow.
pretty crazy that people hoard items that are not even related to those people. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no. I'm an antiquer. I collect stuff. I love chairs. I also collect vintage Playboys. I collect medical stuff. So I love all that stuff. Like
Sure.
I'm into all that stuff, kind of stuff. And I was gonna ask you, there is I had a question in my head. Maybe it'll come back to me. I know what I want to ask you really quick because there's 3 questions here that I want to ask you too. But um um do you get stuff from all over the world?
Yeah, I mean, predominantly the talking board was most popular in America.
Right. I was gonna say, because a lot of movies, a lot of the movies from other countries, don't tend to involve the Ouija board. It was more
Yeah, I
American
mean,
thing.
it's mostly popular here, especially during a war. They do make them in other countries. They're just not as common. What's funny is I've met people who have visited from Singapore, and they've come to the museum and they looked and they're like, "This is a real thing. We thought this was only from movies. We had no idea."
Really?
Oh yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So I love getting that international perspective because they're not as common in other countries. But luckily, like I said, I've toured. I've been in a band and toured quite a bit, and so I have a lot of friends in other countries who all look for me as well. So
Yeah.
I have a a pretty good group of people that are trying to help me find them. So we have boards from Japan. We have it's in a different language. A Russian
Really?
Russian alphabet board, and then
Oh, that sounds
Germany,
cool.
France, Italy, Spain.
Oh, I would love to see them.
Yeah.
Did they make those in the United States?
No, they made them in those other countries.
Oh,
Yeah.
and then you guys got one.
Yeah, I mean, for one of the ones in Germany, I have a friend in Hamburg, Germany, who I played and toured in bands with and stuff, and we found it, and the person would not ship it to the United States, so I luckily had my friend buy it
Did it,
and
and
then
then
ship and then reship it to us to
yeah.
do that, to secure it. Yeah.
Do you mind me asking what something like that costs? Is it expensive to buy these from other countries?
And they can be. I mean, if that comes to America and gets put on American eBay, then it's potential that it could go up because most people in the U.S. have no access to finding those things.
Right.
But if you can find it in the wild in Germany, I
Right.
mean, maybe $50 or something like that. Not a lot of money. I mean, in my view, that's not a lot of money.
No.
To own something that in the United States is probably,
Non-existent?
less than 5 or something like that known, if that,
Yeah.
so, you know, sometimes,
What's the oldest one you've gotten from another country?
um,
Do they tend to be a little bit just more manufacturer type
I think
boards?
off the top of my head, maybe like around, well, not counting the Ouija brand, because we're talking almost 2 different things. The Ouija
Okay.
brand, they license that to Canada and the UK right away. So there are boards, 1892 that we do have from those countries, but they're the Ouija brand. The competitors, the people that just make a normal talking board, spirit board, whatever, they start early as well.
Right.
So, off the top of my head, 1920s might be one of the earliest non Ouija brands that I have from a different country.
Do you have a Ouija brand from another country?
I have, yeah, I have plenty of Ouija from other countries.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just want,
they
yeah.
license it, legally license it to another manufacturer to put the Ouija logo on it. Yes, I have plenty of those. But as far as like, someone making the Hexenbrett in Germany, they tend to be a lot more rare.
Mm,
But you do find them as early as 1920 or so.
that's awesome. Somebody was, this is good. There are so many stories of people having negative experiences after playing with the board. Are there stories of people having negative experience when the board first came out, or is this something that seemed to happen later in years?
That's a great question. I mean, I won't lie. There's definitely plenty of negative things that happen early on. Um, there's 1886 when these boards are homemade. The very first depiction in the newspaper we see of one, the headline called it a devil board. So it has that darker association from the very beginning, even for the Ouija brand. 1900, there's a suicide associated with the Ouija board down in Connecticut. There's murders by the 1930s. The first, Ouija murder in 1933.
What do you mean? Like, so somebody played with the Ouija board and then killed somebody?
Absolutely, yeah. There's a lot of those kind of stories exist, but even though those kind of bad things are happening, most people did not view it as an evil or negative thing. You got to think Civil War, World War One. Everyone.
Why were they focused more around the wars? Why did people? Why were they more?
Everyone's dying. They're affected by death, and so now you might have
So what
lost
were
your
you
father
viewing?
or grandfather, and so you really are looking for comfort, closure, answers, those kind of things. So that tends to be why they're most popular during a war, is around those times.
That's
And
interesting.
that's really the whole spiritualist movement in America, really kind of starting during the Civil War, really picking up momentum during the Civil War.
Right. And then the Fox sisters used them
Mhm.
too, right? I
They
mean,
didn't. Well, they didn't use a talking board, but they are responsible for
the planchette, maybe?
modern spiritualism here in America. They were the two. There's three sisters, but two of them had made a claim that they could communicate with spirits who had knocked a response back to them.
That's right.
And
That's
so
right.
that simple claim, other people start claiming it. And so the evolution of the conversation changes from asking yes and no questions, waiting for a knock or two, to counting knocks to figure out what letter of the alphabet that they're on, to eventually pointing to the alphabet and waiting for a knock. So that kind of became device number one, was an alphabet board that people pointed to. Device number two, which I'm sure Brandon told you all about, was the automatic writing planchette, which had a pencil at the front and wheels at the back. And that just worked by a medium channeling a spirit to themselves and then writing or drawing on a piece of paper, whatever came through. So once that device kind of comes from the spiritualist movement in Europe, comes to America and cross paths with our alphabet board, that's how these two come about. So the Fox sisters are really responsible for just knocking, claiming these conversations.
There was never a record of them using the Ouija board or, no.
No, but it's evolving at different speeds throughout these different spiritualist camps in America. So someone in Ohio might have already matched up that automatic writing planchette with the alphabet board, whereas not too far, 100 miles away, they could be taking alphabet cards and taking a bowler hat and hovering it over letters, waiting for knocks. So it's evolving slightly different pace going around. Closer to 1886 is really when we kind of get what we would think of today as a talking board, where they
Right.
really match together.
Wow. That's so cool. And who thought to do that?
Yeah, it's just you got to think, the Fox sisters were 1848, a couple years before the Civil War. But like I said, that spiritualist movement in Europe had already begun. Like table tipping and seances, automatic writing, were all things that they were using. So by the time the Civil War happens here, it's kind of like, we need to start talking to the dead too. And
Yeah.
so it just becomes really an explosion of people having these conversations and seances and whatnot.
So I have to go back really quick.
Sure.
So who gets that detailed assignment from the White House to help you guys try to track down the Glover Cleveland one? Who,
Yeah,
like,
because normally it would be the presidential library is where we would have started. In this case, there were no presidential libraries back then. So we have to go through, like I said, the National Archives, Smithsonian, the White House. I can't tell you exactly who is helping us there, but I can say we've reached out to them to try to get help
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that is so cool that they're willing to help out with stuff, because the White House is supposedly haunted as well.
Well, they were having seances there for sure.
Yeah, so yeah, Mary Lincoln
Yep.
Todd did it.
Yep.
I remember that, hearing about that. But I mean, I have a book, and it's like the White House, the hauntings of the White House, and there's been several presidents in there that have claimed that they've experienced stuff in the White House that's unexplainable. They think
Yeah.
it's ghosts and stuff. So, and when everybody asks me that question when I'm on a show, and they're like, "What's the one place you want to go to?" I'm like, "The White House."
Yeah.
I would love to investigate the White House.
You have all access.
Oh
Absolutely.
my God, that would be awesome. So with that being said, what is the one thing that you don't have that you wish you could get your hands on and put in your museum?
For me personally, it's a planchette specifically that I'm looking for. I have the board that it goes to, but it's from 1933. It's called the Electric Mystifying Oracle, and it's a metal planchette that had ball bearing casters on it. It had a battery and a light bulb inside of it. So it's a very oddball thing for the 1930s. It sold for a lot of money, so the board was not successful. They scrapped them for the war effort. So today we know of 7 boards and only 4 planchettes to still exist. So that is really the grail that I look for. And I can tell you, I honestly spend hours every day specifically looking for that. And I know where the 4 are, but those people, I've not been able to convince them to sell it or to lend it to the museum, which I'd be
Oh,
happy. For me,
why?
I don't have to own it. I'm quite okay just being able to talk about it in the museum. And so, ultimately that's the most important thing to me, is getting people to see it, learn something that they wouldn't get to see otherwise if it's not in a
Yeah,
museum.
it's the people they don't want to.
No, and I totally get it. Like if you own something that rare, you don't want it out of your sight.
Yeah.
And so I don't blame anybody for not wanting to do that, but
So
hopefully
wait,
someday.
how many boards to planchettes were there?
There's right now, I think we know of 7 boards and 4 planchettes.
So how
Just
come they get separated?
They do. That happens. That's a pretty common thing with vintage boards, is the planchette will break, it gets lost, separated, put in another thing. And so no matter how rare the boards are, I can tell you the planchettes are usually way more rare.
Really?
Yep. Yep,
Wow,
absolutely.
that's interesting. Um, uh, well, we are at our hour.
All right.
So I'm sure, there was one more question. I think this was when you were talking about um with a light bulb, 1933. Wow.
Yes.
Yeah, that
Yep.
does sound really cool. There was one more, and I think this was when you were talking about your house having the different,
All the rooms. Yeah.
rooms. Sorry, Jason, but he said, "Do you have a Jason Voorhees?"
No, no. I mean, I collect a lot of monster toys. Most of the stuff I tend to collect is early 70s, early 70s and earlier. A lot of 60s stuff. So a lot of like monster, Universal stuff. But no, it's not really any like 80s horror stuff.
And then, speaking of all that stuff, I feel like I might have cut you off when you were talking about it, because I was like I was like getting excited about coming in my head. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to get to see 2 museums, really, your house and then, the place. But Kentucky Fried Chicken, where's that come from?
It's not a short story. I'm happy to tell you about it.
Please. I mean, I'm like, Kentucky Fried
It,
Chicken.
it,
Okay.
it, go, it
Like,
goes in a lot of directions. I'm glad you asked me about it because I love it. It starts, it really, I think there's few things. There's, my mother didn't cook for me when I was a kid. I grew up in the 70s and the 80s, and I honestly ate McDonald's 5 nights a week. That was
I
it.
love McDonald's. I
And
love.
so, Kentucky Fried Chicken, there was one 20 miles in either direction from me. And so it really was maybe a twice a year thing that I had it. And so to me, it kind of became like this exotic food, something I didn't have very often, and I looked forward to it. And then when I really started collecting things when I was high school and I got my own car, I was going to antique shops, when I was 16 years old, and I stumbled upon Colonel Sanders plastic bank, a statue of him. And to me, it just resonated. I was like, this is so cool. I can't believe this. They made this kind of merchandise. And so this is before the internet, before eBay. And so I would go looking for this stuff, which it just was really hard to find.
Yeah, I don't recall ever. I go into a lot of antique shops. I don't
Yeah.
recall. I was just sitting here trying to think, like, if I've ever been in one and saw a Kentucky Fried Chicken thing, like, because I like to go into the consignments.
Sure, of
Like
course,
I mean, you see Coca-Cola. That was a big one. Everybody
yeah.
collected Coca-Cola stuff, but
And lots of McDonald's toys, but
right.
KFC, there was quite a bit of things. There was Halloween masks, there was different banks, there's salt and pepper shakers, like all these different things that you could find. And so when eBay came about, I just went, I always like to collect things that were hard to find, and even with Ouija boards today, And so eBay, I ended up buying quite a bit, meeting people that toured with the Colonel and took photographs of them, ribbon cuttings at restaurants and whatnot. And so I kind of have owned everything that I ever wanted to own, And over time, I've been like, all right, that's a little too much. And I've downsized and really just curated one room of my favorite items. And at being a musician, I always figured I would play music for the rest of my life in some capacity, maybe not making a living at it. But I didn't go to college. I just started playing in bands when I was, 14, 15 years old. And when I got out of high school, I joined up as many as 6 bands at a time, and I would tour the world. I kind of had a reputation for being known to quit my job last minute to go on tour with a band and learn all their songs. And so I kind of felt as though, like, what am I going to do exactly? I never got a career. I never, what am I going to do for the rest of my life to make money? And I always looked at the Colonel as somebody who I admired. He failed at a lot of businesses. He didn't find success until his 60s. He failed at being like a train conductor, a salesman, and he didn't really find, Kentucky Fried Chicken until he was in his 60s. So I always set that as kind of like the benchmark of like, all right, well, you don't know what you're doing, but you have plenty of time. If the Colonel didn't figure it out till he was 60, you got plenty of time. Well, the crazy thing is that my mother was sitting in my dining room one time, and it's all Kentucky Fried Chicken. And she says, hey, we have that picture of Colonel Sanders in the photo album. I was like, what? What are you talking about? Well, I was born in Florida. I lived there till I was 3. So I have no memory of Florida whatsoever. But in this photo album from when I was a baby, there is a picture of Colonel Sanders on a float going through the St. Petersburg parade.
Oh, wow.
And I am sure at some point that I knew that was there. I acknowledged it, and it just planted its seed subliminally into my head. And so, what I love about that is, when you talk about the Ouija board and people thinking that maybe there's, not an afterlife, there's no spirits or ghosts, people can use the board not believing in an afterlife and believing they are going to tap into their subconscious, and that somehow you do know something you don't think you know. And I think the Colonel Sanders is one of those things where, how did I become inspired to collect all these things? I don't remember that being in the photo album. The funny thing is I was telling the story at Michigan Paracon a couple of years ago to like Heather Taddy and some people. And I was like, I'm always looking for this thing. Like, I have till I'm 60 to find my passion, to find my thing. And I stopped and I was like, you idiot. You found your thing. You got the museum, and that's the thing that you're passionate about. And I'm so busy looking for it that I never stopped to actually think that I might have found my true happiness, my place that I really, the museum is a very special place for me, because even though I've been a musician and toured and been on stage, I can tell you in most cases I'm not comfortable. I don't make eye contact with people. I want to kind of be in my own little world and perform, but not really engage.
Right.
And in the museum, it's the total opposite. I am very comfortable there. Talking about Ouija boards is something I love, and hearing people's stories, and it's just it's really my happy place. And so to realize that I had looked for so long to find that, only to realize 2 years into it, I had already had it,
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I totally feel you on that, on, not just like my show, you know what I mean? I love doing my show. I love talking. I love meeting people. I love hearing and sharing and promoting and, all that stuff,
Sure.
But I could never be a salesperson, but I can sell Gettysburg.
Yes, there you go. Yeah.
At the tip of Gettysburg. That is my happy place. One day I hope to live there, you know.
Nice.
But that's my happy place. So I get it. If I could be there. I've gone there 10 days by myself and
Yeah.
I've had a great time. I've met friends and people and talked and walked and you know what I mean? So I
Yeah.
get it.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah. Oh, it's great.
It's important for people to find that, I think,
Yeah.
it's something that I wished I had found, or, I had been looking for a long time. And I think most people are, they're looking for something that's what makes them the most happy they can be. And pretty amazing, because I think a lot of people look, but they don't actually ever find it.
Yeah. I think it's amazing what you guys do. I really do. I remember when the headstone got put in. I
Yeah.
remember seeing the pictures and stuff, and I was like, that is just
Yeah.
amazing. You guys are doing so much, and people don't realize that it goes back and all the history and stuff. And I think that that's important. To preserve the history of this kind of stuff for
It
sure.
is. Yeah. I think, if you have a passion for something, and in any way, shape, or form, you can help promote it, or keep it alive. It's a great thing, with the Bond Stone. Is here's this guy who's responsible for all of us loving Ouija boards, and then the sad thing, he didn't have a headstone put over him. So being able to raise money and put that in, and leave a legacy behind, not just for him, for the Talking Board Historical Society, it's really special. I think a lot of collectors are different that way. They wouldn't, I don't know, if you collect Matchbox cars, I don't know if you're going to go put a plaque up as to where the factory was or something. But with Ouija boards, we'll go put that, we'll put that plaque up, and we'll acknowledge it as best we can.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, it's great. And, you never, you don't realize, like a lot of people probably didn't realize that all this stuff was out there or existed.
Yeah.
So I thank you so much for coming on and sharing all that with me.
My
And
pleasure. I had so much fun talking with you.
yes, in 2024, I am coming to Salem, Massachusetts.
You send me a message, and
And
you'll get the best tour possible.
Pull up in my Honda and pick Sherry up, and her and I and whoever else wants to come. We're gonna come and raid, not take anything, but I know Jossie, I wouldn't leave you behind for sure.
I think you have a whole carload of people going with
Yeah, I
us.
think I'm gonna we're gonna have a very awesome time there, because I'm definitely coming to see your museum, and I'm definitely coming. I want to see your house too. So
Absolutely, you're invited.
Sounds so cool. 3 Halloween rooms. I love it.
And the whole garage is packed. Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
In a good way. It's all displayed. It's not.
Yeah, no, it sounds fantastic. Yeah. I bet. I can only imagine. John, thank you so much for coming on and sharing. Maybe one day we can go live again. We can go live from the museum, and
sure,
we can
love to do that.
See a couple of stuff, and kind of grab some people to come in. They want to see more.
Absolutely, I'm happy to do that anytime. We can go live from the Kentucky Fried Chicken. If I can get I can give you a little tour as I go through or whatever. Happy to talk to you anytime that you want. Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you. Everybody, please go check out the Salem Witch Board Museum.com and check out the museum. And if you're in Salem, go see it. If you live there, go check it out. And one day, hopefully we'll have you on again, and maybe we can get Murch to come on too. And you guys
he's going to be so bummed. He's going to listen to this and be like, damn it, I wish I felt better. I would love to have been on here.
Yeah, we had a lot of people checking in from all over, so that's really cool. So I
thank you. That's really awesome. I'm not used to looking down at the bottom to see the questions, and I really appreciate that people are engaging and asking those questions. Pretty special. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And I'll be in touch for sure. Again, thank you so much. Please give my best to Bob.
I will.
I hope he feels better. And thank you again.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. We'll see you soon.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.